Stanley, Scuba, Sailing, and Adventures. This is the introduction for a series of dive videos to follow from my trip to the Galapagos. The first thing I wanted to talk about is getting there. First of all, the Galapagos are located off the coast of Ecuador in the Pacific Ocean and several hundred miles off the coast. There's no way to get there that I know of without spending a night in mainland Ecuador on the way in and on the way out. There are two different options. You can go through Guayaquil or I'm drawing a blank on the other city. I chose Guayaquil. It's closer to the coast, and if you stay in the other city in the mountains, which is supposed to be more scenic, you still have to land in Guayaquil even if you don't deplane before you can get to Galapagos. So just a little background on my specific experience. And the boat I was supposed to be on was broken. I found out when I was at the airport. I had already spent the night in Guayaquil. I was boarding to go to Galapagos. I got an email from the charter company that the boat was broken and they were going to put us on a different boat. So I proceeded, just too far in at that point really to do anything else. The boat was nice. It was a luxury boat, but it was not a dive boat. It did not have a dive deck. It didn't have a compressor. So they borrowed a compressor. The crew on that boat and captain really did the best they could to accommodate a boat full of divers. So there were some challenges there. The compressor was really not big enough to handle the load, the number of tanks we had, and the frequency with which we needed to fill them. They didn't have spare filters. At one point we got a couple bad air fills, which we didn't realize until we were in the water. And by bad air fills, I don't mean carbon monoxide. I mean the air smelled and tasted of oil. And that's partly my fault that I didn't check. If you go back to your original open water training, right, you're supposed to check the air each time, but doing liveaboards and lots of repetitive diving, I guess I got lax and I just put too much trust into the dive operators. And actually the guy operating the compressor was from the original charter's crew. So he should have known better and should have been checking there, I would have thought. A little about the actual diving in Galapagos. I'm a warm water guy. I do a lot of Caribbean diving. I do some diving locally in the Midwest in a quarry, but really for the most part, I'm a warm water diver. I wish I would have done more cold water diving prep. I did go to the quarry and kind of check out, my gear for insulation to make sure I had enough. I actually carried a thermometer around with me on a couple dives and went to different levels within the quarry so I could see at different thermoclines, what is the temperature, how am I feeling? And all of that worked out pretty well, so I was pretty confident with the insulation I brought. However, what I wasn't ready for was the way they dive in the Galapagos. They really want you to be overweighted so that you can lay on the bottom. A lot of it is laying on the bottom. There's not a lot of swimming around. And then there's a lot of chasing whale sharks. You wait and you wait for the whale sharks to come by, and then everybody races out towards the whale sharks. That sort of diving, I was really uncomfortable with being overweighted like that. It caused me to use a lot of my air, putting air in the BC, right? And just a way in which a manner of diving that I'm not used to. And I tend to not really do great with my air consumption. I'm okay, but sometimes I'll go steel 100 instead of an 80. And I didn't, and I wish I'd gone steel 100 because I constantly felt like I didn't have enough air in the tank, and a lot of the diving was uncomfortable. So Having known that, now if I was going to prep for a trip to Galapagos, I would also practice diving with extra weight and being able to just lay on the bottom. Uh, I've been diving for very nearly 40 years, or just over 40 years. So ideally, I dive with as little weight as possible. And diving with as little weight as possible makes me better with my air consumption, more comfortable in the water. So really, there were a couple things going on there that made it challenging. Also, the conditions there. There's a lot of surge. There's a lot of current. I tried to shoot video on every dive. I'm going to try to do a video of every dive, but you're really thrown around a lot, especially when you're trying to hang on to the bottom and you have the surge moving you back and forth. And I'll try to show a little bit of that with the camera. But incredible diving. I mean, beautiful. And just like you see in the commercials and the movies and Nat Geo, there's so much to see there. There's so much going on. It's like being in an aquarium. Just incredible diving. I hope to go back and be better prepared for the next time. One final lesson learned that I'll share before we dive into the chart, and I'll show some of the dive sites and the location, the geography, just kind of things were laid out and where we went. Airlines, right? I tend to go with a couple airlines that I have a lot of points with, and my preferred airline to go to Ecuador only had 2 flights per day. That turned out to be a real learning experience for me. The plane on the way home that I was supposed to get on was broken. We actually taxied out, we came back. We had to clear back in through customs and immigration. They put us up at the hotel and shuttled us there. That was fine. But the same thing happened the next day. They wouldn't bring a new plane down. We actually got on the plane, taxied out, had to come back again and clear back in through customs and immigration. And believe it or not, that actually happened a 3rd time. So I was stranded in Ecuador for several days. And finally, on the last day, when that plane was broken again, I'm like, just get me on some different airlines. And they're like, we can't. But I'd gone online and found it. I found a way to get home. It was 5 flights through 4 different cities and almost 24 hours, but I made it home. So the lesson and the reason I share that, I'm not complaining, right? It's part of the deal when you travel, right? It's always an adventure. But I will not fly an airline that has minimal flights in and out of the city, right? I'll switch airlines and I'll go because there were a bunch of airlines going in and out, but I had already committed financially to that airline and I wasn't going to buy just another ticket. So anyway, lesson learned. If I'm flying somewhere that's different for me, I'm going to look for an airline that has many flights per day in and out of that city. So anyway, let's dive into the chart. We'll look at some of the dive sites, and then the video series on the actual dives will follow. So we landed here on Baltra, and the boat was moored in the channel between Baltra and Santa Cruz. We actually did a checkout dive right here off the back of the boat in the channel, and then we did 2 dives right over here. After that, we headed up to Darwin, and I'll have to change the camera position because Darwin is far away. I don't remember how long it took us to get there, but it was at least an overnight trip. So we went all the way up here to Darwin, which is the furthest away, and we spent a day and a half at Darwin, and then we went to Wolf and we did some diving at Wolf, spent a full day there. From Wolf we headed back down toward the main group of islands, and we stopped here and we did a couple dives here at Cape Douglas. From here we went to dive Isla Isabella, right here at the seahorse's nose. You can see this island does look like a seahorse. And then after diving here, we stopped at this little spot off the island of San Salvador. This little spot here, it's very hard to see on this chart. It's called Cousins Rock. And that was our last dive. And then we made our way back to the channel and ended where we'd begun.
Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment.